evening, good evening, good evening. This is Community Voices TV coming to you with the Minority Community Health Report, giving you an update on the pandemic that is afflicting our community and a behind the scenes look at why this pandemic is so devastating to our community. Today is May 18th, and I'm your host, Dr. Aubrey Orrin Lewis. And let's start today by giving you a brief review of some of the statistics to date as published by Newsday. In Suffolk, there are 38,000 cases. Nassau, 39,000 cases confirmed. New York City, 193,000 cases. And the state has 351,000 cases. And the total tests done in Nassau County, 135,000 for a population of 1.5 million or so. All right. So it's clear that the testing is not as adequate as it should be. In Nassau County, the death toll is 2,053. In Suffolk is 1,754. New York State, 223,000. And in New York City, 16,000. In Hempstead, it's 2,083. In Uniondale, where it all began, it's 1,100. Notice that these deaths are not given by race, but we know that most of the deaths are African Americans, not only in Nassau County, but also in Suffolk and in the New York City, the state, and the nation, for that matter. What is so sad is that you're getting these so-called politicians coming up with excuses such as these folks, for want of a better excuse why African Americans are dying, their excuse is, well, they live in dense communities, they work in jobs that predispose them to these kinds of things, and this is why they're suffering. In other words, blame the victim. You are responsible for your suffering. I thought it was the responsibility of government to protect its citizens regardless of where they work or live. But apparently this does not apply to blacks and other minorities. This is the message we are getting from New York State, the governor, and his fellow politicians. This is creating a lot of frustration, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion, and so blacks are beginning to wonder: is it time for us to stop complaining about these disparities in healthcare that seem to not go away? They're chronic, and do something about it. Complaining doesn't seem to be making a bit of difference. It's falling on deaf ears. So some blacks, some people are beginning to wonder if it's not appropriate to actually, stop complaining about these disparities. Okay. So what we see is that the coronavirus pandemic has once again pointed out these chronic disparities that exist in health and health care among black citizens. Here in Nassau County, New York, and across the nation, the death toll from the pandemic has been highest in every black community. The nation seems to be perplexed, as I said earlier, and have no plausible explanation for this genocide. The Corona King, the governor of New York, of the many self-messaging coronavirus daily briefings he has given, as well as the Nassau County executive, makes no mention of the pandemic in the black community. And worst of all, what will be done to address this crisis? Nothing is being said. In an article recently published in ProPublica, dated May 16th, 2020, the headlines declare, two coasts, one virus, how New York suffered nearly 10 times the number of deaths as California. That's an interesting article, and it comes back to what I've been saying before. But let's go through the article, pieces of the article I'm quoting. It's saying here that California's governor and San Francisco's mayor worked together to act early in confronting the COVID threat. For Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio, it was a different story, and 27,000 New Yorkers have died so far. Now, that's not Dr. Lewis saying that. This is the story of May 16th in ProPublica. Okay? San Francisco Mayor London Breed, by March 14th, Mayor Breed realized that something was wrong. So, what she did, she called the governor and said, Governor, something is wrong. People are getting ill. And she proposed to a stay-in-place order, which was the first time I heard about such a thing. And California Governor Newsom, very progressive, agreed that something needed to be done and gave her the go-ahead. Okay? So Mayor Breed also notified Mayor de Blasio of New York of her concerns. She even went to the extent of sending him a copy of her detailed shelter-in-place order. She thought New York might benefit from it. New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo, however, reacted to de Blasio's idea for closing New York City with derision. Could you believe that? It was dangerous, he said, and served only to scare people. Language mattered, Cuomo said, and shelter in place sounded like it was a response to a nuclear apocalypse. Moreover, Cuomo said, he alone had the power to order such a measure. Sounds like a classic narcissist. For years, Cuomo and de Blasio, each of whom has harbored national political ambitions, had engaged in a kind of intrastate Cold War, a rivalry that to many often felt childish and counterproductive. When de Blasio finally decided to close the city schools, it was Cuomo who rushed to make the public announcement claiming it as his decision. No city in the state can quarantine itself without state approval, Cuomo said of de Blasio's call for a shelter-in-place order. I have no plan whatsoever to quarantine any city. So, as these incompetent and insensitive racists carry on their childish battle, thousands of black New Yorkers became ill and died. What an indictment. It is clear that the people and the media must call for an investigation of de Blasio and Cuomo's handling of this pandemic. The destruction of the healthcare infrastructure by the governor, the lack of a public health prevention program, and the lack of masks, gloves, PPEs, and respirators. If he is so omnipotent, he should have seen this pandemic coming and be ready to deal with it, protect his citizens. Governor Cuomo was so busy fighting with de Blasio and looking for business opportunity for his business partners at Nortel that he did not realize the impact of the coronavirus pandemic and his pandemic of incompetence had on the health of the black community. The governor was not aware that blacks accounted for approximately 92.3%, 93 per 100,000 deaths. It was not until public advocate Jumaane Williams held a press conference and Representative Jeffries supposedly mentioned it to the governor that the governor pretended to become aware of this crisis. They interrupted his busy acting schedule to tell him this, that blacks were dying at an acceptably high rate. Imagine that had to be done to bring some consciousness to the suffering and death of black New Yorkers. And then we sit here as hypocrites and complain about Trump and McConnell when they do the same thing. These two gentlemen of Verona, as Shakespeare would say, Nassau County. In Nassau County, the response to the clueless Commissioner of Health and the legislator from the first district was appalling. As I mentioned earlier, without attribution, but I can attribute now, they had an interview with Newsday, and they basically said that, the folks were getting sick because they lived in dense communities and they work in jobs that exposed them to the virus. Again, blame the victim, not the president, as the governor did for his own incompetence. Absent a public health preventive policy, nowhere did these two gentlemen mention the Nassau County Health Department and the Nassau County Executive Coran Jacobs' failure to have and deploy a public health plan to prevent tests, quarantine, contact trace, mitigate, treat, deploy social, educational, financial resources to the community. To this day, none of what I have mentioned has been done. What is the purpose of a legislator that is absent in a pandemic? What is the purpose of a county branches of government that are missing in action? And what's the purpose of a county executive whose only job is to say what her chairman tells her to say and North Shore tells her to say and give daily updates that are useless? This is why you can see why the governor sidelined all of these parasitic agencies. He felt they were useless. He didn't say that to them, but his actions belie his meaning, and he usurped their power and function. I have never seen in New York missing agencies as we see now. Now, you can say it's a pandemic and it's horrible, but the agencies of government are missing. And the only thing we can see is the governor on TV with his daily useless briefings. Okay? The governor, our king, took several pages from Trump's playbook, and that is cheating. Here is a great idea for the governor. Since he is already using the distraction caused by the pandemic as a portal for a power grab, I think the ineffectiveness and absence of these useless patron jobs clearly shows that we can cut out all of these layers of useless jobs that everyone wanted to cut out for years. And while he is reimagining New York State with his buddies, he should realize that he can do without 90% of these patronage jobs. Layers upon layers and layers and layers of county governments and so on. And you know, people have been talking for years that we need to cut these things out and just have one responsible authority to not govern us, but to, we're not subjects, but to perform the necessary duties that a society needs. And certainly a society doesn't need to be governed. They need to, the business of the people need to be attended to. And this is what we're not seeing in New York. Okay? With this imagining, the state's workforce, with an emphasis on technology improvements the governor's business partners are employing in their respective businesses, the state can operate more efficiently with 90% fewer workers by some estimates and have a significant surplus. Now, I heard the other day the government talking about not having money to do anything. Could you imagine now? He will have all the money. Okay? What is left of the surplus after the governor and his business partners divvy it up can still be used to support our safety net hospitals and other institutions, education, jobs, acquiring the masks, gloves, PPEs, and respirators for the next pandemic, ladies and gentlemen, which I am sure within the next couple of years will come. Okay? The governor can also briefly stop his pursuits of profits with his business partners for a moment and make health and health care for all a state security priority by pursuing a vigorous public health and prevention policy. And that, my friends, would be a change by someone fit to be a king or a fascist, whichever one happens first. But will that happen? I leave it up to you, the people, to decide. The people themselves will have to reimagine the structure of their government in the interpandemic period. As I said, once this is calmed down a bit, there will be another one because of global warming and all the things, upheavals that are happening in our society. We will see more and more of these pandemics. Okay? So, again, we will have to look and see as we reimagine our state. Don't leave it to the governor. He's already bringing his friends over We should decide. Okay? We have seen that the bloated government has failed to prevent this pandemic, and certainly this pandemic and the suffering that it has entailed. Now, after the governor was told that the black churches, the black community was suffering, he responded by directing his business partner, Mikey Dowling, to take his North Hill testing kit to two of the governor's favorite black churches in Nassau County and perform the spectacle of a few tests each. Now, I already mentioned earlier, there's in Nassau County, with a population of 1.5 million or thereabouts people, only 50,000 tests have been performed to date. So how many tests do you think that 2 or 3 days of testing by his buddy at North Hill, how many people you think will be tested? And will it make a difference? Uniondale, there's probably about 50,000 people. And Hempstead, 70 to 100,000 people. So this is just a spectacle to placate the black pastors who will be giddy with pride for being selected. Notice he's paying no attention to the rest of the black community. And neither are they. Okay? And this is how slavery was initiated, and this is how slavery is maintained to date. Now, there's an old letter. It's called the Willie Lynch letter to the planters. And I want you to get a hold of that letter and read it, black folks. We tend to not pay attention to our history very well, and we need to be brought up to speed with our history, because this is going to be very important as we try to, if we try to, reimagine our role in this society and the rest of the nation. Okay? You know, Newsday did a series. This is not a secret. Newsday did a series in 1989 entitled The Health Divide. And it showed clearly that in every disease category, the illness of death and destruction were, unbelievable in the black community. We topped the list in every category of disease. We topped the category in illness and death. Was anything done about it? No. And this was in Queens. This was in Suffolk. This was in Nassau County. There was a beautiful study. And Newsday is not particularly known for their kindness or likeness to black folk. But I want you to get a copy of that and read it for yourselves. Okay? So, everybody knows across the state and across the county and across the nation that racism and healthcare disparities are prevalent. However, nothing is being done about it. Okay? And I don't care who the leader is, nothing is being done. And this is because structural racism will not allow it. Here in New York, our governor doubled down on the situation by closing most of the community facing hospitals that serve the black and minority community. And then he added insult to injury by giving the carcass of these institutions to his business partner, Mikey Dowling of North Hill, to make a profit. The governor also followed up by totally destroying the healthcare infrastructure of New York that has served New York for so long. And again, handing the carcass over to his buddy, Mikey Dowling, at North Hill. His motto at that time and his mantra was, hospitals not making money, so they must close. Of course, the exception is North Hill. North Hill are experts at making lots of money. So Mikey Dowling will now become the health czar, while North Hill will become New York's premier hospital corporation. What a sweet tale. Since when are hospitals are supposed to make money off of your sickness and distress? You should ask Governor Cuomo and Mikey Dowling. Nowhere else in the world is this perversion of humanity and human dignity allowed. In Europe, everyone's health is covered, even the undocumented. In Europe, health and healthcare are national security priorities. Not so in New York. Nassau County and the rest of the United States, healthcare are not national priorities. In Germany, healthcare is carefully regulated to benefit the citizens and not the predators. Not so in New York. The state and the governor enables the predators to rape the citizens and make a profit. Profit-driven, money-driven healthcare. And the governor is in the center of making it happen. He runs the nanny state, and he helps his buddies to make it happen. Municipal hospitals serving minorities. These hospitals serving the black, poor, uninsured, and indigent, such as Kings County and downstate hospitals, are left to fall apart. And there are plans to close or privatize them under the banner of North Hill. The same treatment is being given to Nassau University Medical Center. The governor is good at propping up North Hill with grants, and they are allowed to thrive. But Nassau University Medical Center is being stripped of its assets and pushed deliberately into failure with the excuse that it cannot support itself. Well, what do you expect, Governor? If you and Mikey Dowling take all of the beds, refuse to open the cath lab, take GYN, take orthopedics, take cardiology away from the medical center, and refuse to give it grants, refuse to pray for prison care, refuse to support it like you do North Hill, what do you expect? This is a blatant attack on the minority community. This hospital serves the minority community. This is a murderous, brutal, vicious, violent attack against the minority community. And I want you to know that. Okay? So, the governor, Mikey Dowling, the Cabal and Coran Jacobs have decreed that Nassau University Medical Center must be closed to make way for that profit machine. That the Democrats and the governor and everybody love. Nortel. Then, to add insult to injury, you will soon be driving past the building on Hempstead Turnpike, and it will now be renamed the North Hill Hilton Hotel. Compliments of the governor. So you see that the governor and Miss Coran Jacobs, they have tremendous issues protecting and serving and caring for the black and minority and uninsured and undocumented and Latin or whatever else community. Any community that is not providing funding for Northwell or Northwell can be a predator for, they don't want. And so they're slowly but surely sterilizing the community to make it all Northwell. So we've always talked about one of the big issues with minority health care, besides the absence of a public health prevention policy addressed to minority blacks in particular, studying of their high blood pressure, diabetes, and all these things that can and should be done at the medical center, is access to care. You hear a lot of the progressive liberals talk about, one of the problems that blacks have is access to healthcare, access to healthcare, access to healthcare. But all they do is talk about it, and they do absolutely nothing about it. They all sit back and wait for the governor and Miss Coran Jacobs to do something. Well, by now, after 400 years, we should know that the governor and Miss Coran Jacobs and Northwell and Mickey Dowling is not going to do anything. This is why the question is coming up now. Is it time for blacks, stop talking about racial disparities in healthcare and start doing something progressive and constructive about their own health and healthcare? This is what Trump said to Cuomo. When Cuomo was pointing the finger at the governor for not having the PPEs and the respirators, the president rightly said, "It's your state, governor. You failed to prepare." Okay? Now, on May 14th, the New York Times reported that in late March, as the direst public health crisis in New York in a century swept across New York, sick and those caring for them, sick people, and those caring for them faced a hospital system that was less than the sum of its mighty parts. At Elmhurst Hospital in Queens, hundreds of COVID-19 patients arrived in need of more help than the besieged medical workers could give. Patients were found dead in rooms. One medical resident described conditions as apocalyptic. Yet at the same time, 3,500 beds were free in other New York hospitals, some no more than 20 minutes from Elmhurst, according to state records. The city, which runs Elmhurst, had a fleet of 26 new ambulances available to transfer patients. Elmhurst, it seems, was trapped between the pressures of the moment and forces of history that put little value on the cooperation needed for a pandemic. For decades, hospital organizations in New York, just as in many parts of the country, have existed as independent fiefs, rivals that had virtually nothing to do with each other. The state of New York is home to more than 200 hospitals, private and public, run by about 80 nonprofit corporations and agencies, many of whom are probably associated and affiliated with the governor. This is but one example of a dysfunctional private for profit healthcare system that the governor and his business partner, Northell, created. They also allowed other hospital plantations and fiefdoms to emerge, right, that are closing self-service system focus only on profits and market share at the expense of the health, sickness, and sufferings of New Yorkers. The governor and his business partners and the other hospital fiefs and kings and queens are no heroes here. This is why we can never have universal health care, because of the racism, cold indifference, and inhumanity. Now, many are interestingly talking about the, the coronavirus pandemic as a godsend. Interesting. The coronavirus pandemic has been a godsend to the black community. It is as if God is asking, what do you guys plan to do now that I have exposed the evildoers to you? The pandemic has shone a light on the evil relationships between the governor and his business partners that caused the pandemic to run amok and ruin black lives. If you look now, you can see Cuomo and Mikey Dowling everywhere, literally holding hands. They're standing shoulder to shoulder in this. Of course, Mikey even provides the huge slides. Some of those slides are as big as New York itself for his daily misinformation briefing. He's even has Dowling doing the coronavirus testing, which is interesting because Northell and Mikey Dowling, as the state is organized, are not official agencies of the state. The state has a health department. The county has a health department. Yet none of these agencies have been employed by the governor to care for the health of New Yorkers. Instead, the governor has given Mikey Dowling and Northell, I guess he's deputized them into becoming New York's finest hospital and premier healthcare agency. And so he has him doing everything. Antibody testing that's useless and expensive. It's all about making money, my friends. And I am interested to see what share he's going to get of the CARES Act, that useless act that they brought out that supports the 1% and not the people. So, I'm just curious to see what percentage Northell and Mikey Dowling is going to get. You know they're going to get a large percentage, okay? The silence of the black lambs. What is amazing is that none of the black officials, I mean, it's amazing. No one is calling, other than Jumani, nobody's calling the governor out. Where are the black representatives? Where's Carl Heastie? Where is Sharpton? Where is Letitia James? Where are all the others? Okay, where's Kevon? Where's I mean, what happened? I hope that the virus didn't get him because I'm not hearing anything from them. You think if you can't stand up for this, what are you going to stand up for, folks? How are you elected and you're selected to be a leader, and none of you can say to the governor, look, we got to do something for the black community. They're just dying out. Who is going to support you in the next election? And as we know, blacks just, oh boy, that's a whole nother story. Okay? Even Newsday got into the virus briefing. They have a Miss Brown, and she holds frequent podcasts with selective doctors and employees of, guess where? Northwell. Where is she going to go? Okay. These spectacles are superficial and are of no use to the public. Okay. What I want to ask Newsday is, where is Newsday doing an investigation into the disparities and outcome of this pandemic? Where is Newsday doing an investigation into the chronic health disparities, health and healthcare disparities? Where is Newsday doing an investigation into the Nassau County Health Department and the county executive on the incompetent management and poor outcomes of the black community? Where is the investigation of the Nassau County Health Department and the Nassau executive for failing to have in place a public health and prevention plan to prevent the spread of this pandemic? Where is the investigation by Newsday and Ms. Brown into why the Nassau County Health Department and the county executive has failed to this very moment to deploy testing, tracing, containment, and other mitigation strategies in the black community? Where is the investigation by Newsday into the plan initiated by Governor Cuomo, Mikey Dowling, North Hill, and the county executive Corin Jacobs to close Nassau University Medical Center and give the property to be designated as the North Hill Hilton Hotel? Nassau University Medical Center is the only public benefit hospital serving the minority communities that is suffering from the pandemic. Closing this is a death blow to the community, already suffering from lack of access to health care. Where is the investigation from Newsday calling for the state comptroller, Mr. DiNapoli, to perform forensic audits into New York State, Nassau County, North Hill, Nassau University Medical Center? Where is the investigation from Newsday calling on the New York State Attorney General to launch an antitrust New York State investigation into New York State and North Hill for closing community-facing hospitals and denying her fellow black, uninsured, and poor residents the opportunity to have nonprofit hospitals and facilities care for them? Now, Ms. James was recently on Newsday podcast with Ms. Brown, and I'm sure that Ms. Brown did not ask her that very important question. So why is she on the show? That's her forte. If there's anything that can be done in this pandemic, one of the things as part and start of the reimagining our system of healthcare for blacks and other minorities, that should be it. Investigation, antitrust. Okay? It is clear that the people and the media must call for an investigation of de Blasio and Cuomo's handling of this pandemic, the destruction of the healthcare infrastructure by the governor, the lack of a public health prevention program, and the lack of the PPEs, masks, gloves, and respirators. Okay? Also, the power grab by the governor must be investigated by the Attorney General and all of the appropriate authorities. What's left? Structural racism resides in New York. We know that. And as it is in any other part of the nation. And again, in New York, they inflict the violence under the cover of ignorance and indifference. While down in the South, they're very honest. They'll tell you they don't like you. Take the case of Governor Cuomo. He likes folks to think he's a hands-on executive, but some expert thinks that this is a cover. Okay? The governor is not a medical person, but he spends a great deal of time with those charts, giving a lot of misinformation. He wouldn't even yield the stage to his czar, health czar, Mikey Dowling. But then again, Mikey is not a doctor either. So, he wouldn't know what to say either. But Mikey runs the corporation Nortel, and Mikey can get a lot of doctors to put a lot of stuff up there. As long as they're going to make a profit, Mikey is in. Okay? So, what I think the governor should be doing is actually putting on some of those masks and gowns and gloves that have been used and washed and sterilized at least about 30 times. The same stuff that he's asking our healthcare workers, our moms, our dads, our brothers and sisters, the same equipment that he is asking the workers to wear. I think he should put some on, take Mikey Dowling with him and Corinne Jacobs with him, and go visit every single hospital in New York State that has this crisis, that is dealing with this crisis, and help, show support, show that he cares. He says we're fighting a war. That's what generals do. They go visit the front line. They don't stay in an air-conditioned studio. But is that going to happen? Nah. Taking a test on TV, somebody shoving stuff up his nose, that's as far as he's going to go with that. He is not going to go in no hospital. And we saw Corinne the other day talking about racial disparities, and she went out to Bethpage, literally 25 miles away from the nearest black community that is suffering. She bypassed the Nassau University Medical Center on Hempstead Turnpike on her way to Bethpage just to deliver some more drivel. Okay? And this is what we're getting as leadership. But we know that black lives don't matter in New York. So blacks have to decide now. This comes back to the premise of this discussion. Do you want to survive in this democratic plantation or carve out your own health, education, economic, and political space as other minorities are doing. Are you comfortable living in these conditions of virtual slavery? Because it is easier to complain about disparities and police brutality than it is to work at changing the narrative and the paradigm to one of equality. The large masses of blacks were kept in place during slavery by psychological, social, economic, political, and religious constructs. They were led to believe that the white Eurocentric religion was their only way out of this man-made hell. They had to convert and believe in the white deity and his son. Their African traditions and religions were stripped from them and considered worthless. Sunday had to worship him or die. If they endure the suffering imposed by the white man here on earth, they will find salvation in heaven, some mythical place in the sky. But they must obey the master, plantation master, and mistress. They must accept their punishments. They must bow to the king or queen. They must give the church all their money, because apparently this deity has a problem with handling money. And so does the pastors. They must inform and betray their fellow brothers and sisters to the master. And they must depend on the master for all their needs. These concepts are deeply ingrained in the black society and black culture. And it's manifesting itself today with the helplessness and dependency that we see. Even educated blacks are of two minds. They point to their formal education, Monday through Friday, and then they worship the deity on Sunday. They live and work and enjoy the fruits of the capitalist plantation, slavery plantation. Then again, on Sunday, they ignore their African religions and traditions. Okay? How can blacks go back home? How can we go back home? We have totally accepted the Eurocentric, dependent psychology, theology, and philosophy as our own. Africa means nothing to most of us. Our rich heritage and traditions mean nothing. This does not mean that wearing an African costume, you're African. And it does not mean that going back to your traditions is a negation of the long history, incestuous history we have had with America. You can do both. Many religions, many cultures do both. They celebrate, Easter, and they have their other religious ceremonies that they're participating. It's multicultural, multi-deity, I would like, polytheistic. And that's fine. That is wonderful. It makes you a more balanced individual by knowing how other cultures celebrate. So going back to Africa and celebrating our African heritage and cultures and gaining strength is going home. And one of the things that fascinate me is watching the Native Americans or the first people trying to do exactly that, reclaiming their lost culture. They lost so much. So did we. But they are taking steps. They are really working hard. They're refusing to lose any more. And they're working very hard in reclaiming their culture. Leave the white man with his stuff. Get your own. Okay, so we have this dysfunctional relationships with the white society because that frees blacks from having to do the work of correcting the situation. The contract is that the white man will do nothing and we agree to keep complaining. We know that the white man will do nothing to alleviate her plight. He's done nothing for 400 years. But we must stop complaining, and that's a bridge too far. We haven't arrived at that yet. We've accepted this way of life, complaining, complaining, complaining. We've accepted this paradigm and like it and prefer it this way. So why then are we discussing this? And if you discuss this with among some of your black friends, they will tell you, man, you're stirring up trouble with the master. And they'll promptly go and tell him what you said. And they will get their 30, no, not 30 pieces of silver anymore. Blacks usually get a discount. We usually get 2 or 3 pieces. And most other cultures, you wouldn't hear a peep. They would be planning and plotting and doing whatever they have to do to get themselves out of this horrible mess. So we are held back. Blacks are held back by our dependency theology, philosophy, our dependency in healthcare, education, economics, and politics. We are also held back by this incestuous attachment to the Democratic Party. And I guess anthropologists will have to figure that one out. This is the party of slavery that has taken blacks for granted since 1936. They've done nothing to elevate them. They frightened them by telling them, oh boy, the Republican Party will do worse for you. Don't go over there. Blacks forget that prior to 1936, they were Republicans, not Democrats. And also that the Democrats and Republican Party are the same party, same masters, Wall Street. So nothing will be done for them by either party. At least, like the Southerners, the Republicans let you know that up front. The Democrats will gaslight you into believing they are your liberal friends. And we see that happen in the South Carolina primary between Biden and Sanders. Blacks voted against their own interests. This groupthink is a great stumbling block because it discourages independent thought. Many of you know that we tried to open Hempstead General Hospital in Hempstead, the community that's suffering in this pandemic, the epicenter, but of course it was thwarted by the county executive, Swazi, the governor, the health department, and North Hill, with help, I am told, from the black clergy. They were told not to support the project because the project leader is from the Caribbean and they are Americans, and as such, they would be disadvantaged in that process. Now, we complain about Trump being a racist. This, I am told, was County Executive Swazi at his best with his henchman, Gianelli. But we Democrats love you blacks more than those Republicans. We will get you your salvation. Back to Nassau County Medical Center. Again, the governor and, Ms. Curran Jacobs and Dowling, they are hell-bent on closing that institution and turning it into a hotel. What we got here is human indifference, racism, inhumanity by our so-called state and local governments. Let's keep in mind that all pandemics are man made. Remember that all viral pandemics are man made. They arise from and exploit the fissures in society, and the perfect storm of political, social, racial, economic, educational, and class pandemics are the result. This is capitalism's way of reordering the workers and hold on to power and increasing profits. Let me conclude by saying this. It is the duty of the black community to resist this political pandemic and assault on the black health care and black health. We see clearly the governor is wasting no time in exercising his duty to his business partners. We must let the governor, Nordell, Mikey Dowling, Corin Jacobs know that the black community and the communities depending on this hospital will hold them accountable and responsible for its further deterioration and closure. That we see this as a state-sponsored, county-assisted program of violence and genocide against black, uninsured, and poor people. We must keep Nassau University Medical Center open and upgraded back to a full-service teaching and research-focused institution, community-focused institution. We must demand that the institution be free of political malfeasance and interference from the governor, Mikey Dowling, the cabal, Northell, and Corin Jacobs. The board must not be political employees of the governor, the speaker, the county executive, or any of the cabal. The board members must be community residents. The president must be a community resident. The CEO must be a community resident. And they must focus on prevention, cure, research, education, information, training, career, jobs, improved health outcomes, elimination of health disparities, because failure is feeding into the genocidal tendencies that we see in this state. Okay? In addition, blacks need to consider changing their affiliation, political affiliation, and creating an independent space to express themselves rather than depending on the Democratic Party to express it for them. We cannot afford, blacks can't afford virtual slavery with so-called selected representatives who serve the system and not the people they were elected to represent. This is the fault of the black community because they do not and will not hold their so-called selected representatives responsible and accountable. So why then complain? Okay? We are not willing to hold them responsible and accountable. As Jim Rohn said, life is iffy. You will succeed if you try and if you care. So if we try and if we care, we can succeed. But we must try. And so far, we're just sitting back, complaining, and waiting for Governor Cuomo and Ms. Corin Jacobs and Mikey Dowling and Northell to do something for us. Ladies and gentlemen, newsflash. Governor Cuomo, Mikey Dowling, the cabal, Corin Jacobs, and Northell do not plan to do anything for you. This governor has had more than a decade in office, and he has done absolutely nothing but bring pain and suffering and violence to the black health care and the black health. He is orchestrating what some call a genocidal attack, murderous attack. And the virus is doing his bidding. And the silent lambs, the silent black lambs, the silent representatives, so-called representatives, are aiding and abetting. And we must hold them all accountable. In closing, Jim Rohn says, if you do not design your own life plan, chances are you'll fall into someone else's plan. And guess what? They have planned for you. Not much. Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay safe. Take care of yourselves. We will continue this discussion.